Hello. Today we'll talk about the kind of the introduction, some of the ideas that underlie the BEETZ model. The topic on the first slide here is noticing the everyday, and that's what the topic of today's brief video will be. The BEETZ model, is one that identifies several specific practices that take place in what I will refer to as the everyday. So today I will talk about what is the everyday, and how do we notice it in a very kind of systematic way. So this is a quote from a novelist named George Eliot. It's one of my kind of favorite quotes, and I think it's one that sheds a lot of light on the way I like to think about the BEETZ model in particular. So George Eliot was a novelist who wrote during a number of really famous novels, one of which, where this quote comes from, is called Middlemarch. She wrote, George Eliot is a woman author, and this is what she wrote here. She wrote, "For the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. And that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who live faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs." And the word that really, the little part of this quote that really catches me is this term, unhistoric acts. When we think about leadership, and when we think about like being a coach or kind of a visible leader, one of the ways that society often frames coaching or leadership as a series of kind of historic acts, or kind of really visible things that, great moments. So when we read about famous leaders, we read about, their historic exploits, their greatest victories, their greatest achievements. But we hear less about what you could refer to as their unhistoric acts. And these unhistoric acts that George Eliot writes about are really, as we really dig into leadership, as we dig into coaching, they're some of the more foundational, more important things that lead up to the historic acts. Another way we could think about this, instead of just using the term unhistoric acts, is everyday practices. So things that are likely not seen by many people who are on the outside, but that kind of make up the heart of what that practice is, of what that coaching or what that leadership looks like. A number of years ago, actually about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, there was this article in a kind of obscure sociology journal, and as you can see, the title of it is called "The Focus on Everyday Life, A New Turn in Sociology." So there's actually kind of an empirical literature that talks about what we mean by the everyday. And I want to be a little bit precise here in that language, meaning every day as one word, not every day, two words. Every day, what we're talking about, the everyday, like our everyday lives. That's what we'll talk about. I want to identify a few of those here today that comes from this article that you see that was in the European Review in 2008. So what is the everyday, and where is that coming from? So first of all, when we think about the everyday in our lives, the everyday is social. What I mean by that is just if you think about waking up yesterday and what you did yesterday, go through your day yesterday, just think it through mentally. And our days, except for in really rare circumstances, our days are lived in interaction with other people. They're not lived kind of in isolation. So that is an obvious statement. We all know that. But when we think about the BEETZ model, we think about coaching practice, we think about leadership practice, we can't think of it as something that occurs in isolation from others, but it's a social thing. It's a social practice. It's one that occurs with and for others. So that's one aspect of this model that we should think about. The everyday is social. Our lives are social. A second is that the everyday is routine, meaning it's just these little pictures here. It's the things that we just do a whole bunch. We get up in the morning, we get out of bed, we have a certain routine, we take a shower, we have breakfast, we brush our teeth, we get dressed, hop in the car, or hop on our bikes, or whatever it is, up on the bus. They're just kind of like the mundane things that we do that often, we don't think twice about. So the everyday is social, the everyday is routine. It's just the stuff that makes up the way we spend our days, the way, where we walk down a hallway to a certain place, what happens as we're walking down the hallway, and our little conversations we have as we're going to get a cup of coffee. Those things are all kind of routine things. This is a picture of quite a place there right on the water, a beautiful place. And living in a place like that would certainly shape your everyday. It would certainly shape the way you lived your life in a certain way. It'd be a beautiful place. You'd feel the sunshine. You'd hear the ocean. The everyday. The point here is to say that the everyday is localized. So what the everyday looks like there in the place where you see in this picture, versus where you live, where you work, is different. It's shaped by our setting. It's shaped by not only who is around us, but literally the layout of the place around us, the building we work in, the city we live in, whether it's a big urban place, a small kind of rural place, a really beautiful new place, a rundown old place, a lot of factors that shape the way our work or our lives take place. It's localized. There's a certain context to it. And then the last part of the everyday that I'd like to talk about is what we could call it's unnoticed. This is perhaps the most interesting to me, is that there are all these things that we spend our time doing each day, that some of the things I just identified. There are people we spend our time around, the social dynamic. There are places we spend our time, but we often don't even notice them until we really step back and think about them. If you look at this little picture of this kid, I get a kick out of this picture. Nobody notices him. Everybody's walking right by him. He's trying to get a high five. Nobody notices him, just as if he's not even there. So in some ways, our everydays are kind of like this kid, that we just walk right past them every day without really reflecting upon them, without really thinking about what they are and what they mean. So an important first step when we think about these ideas of being a leader, about being a coach, an important first step is to notice our everyday, to really reflect upon it and think about it in a really strategic, systematic way. And after we do that, next we can make the everyday better. So the BEETZ model does not intend to encompass every aspect of leadership or every aspect of making our organizations better. What it focuses on is the everyday. It focuses on these things: the social, the routine things that we do, the kind of unnoticed things that happen in our contexts. That's what the BEETZ focuses on. That's what we'll be really discussing with regard to the BEETZ model, making the everyday better. And specifically, what are we reflecting upon? These are the aspects of the BEETZ model. First of all, it's an acronym. The B stands for brokering. Brokering means, in this context, making connections. It means relationships and connections. What does our coaching, or what does our leadership connect us to, connect people to? It's about brokering. It's a brokering practice in the everyday. Secondly, we're talking about a notion of embeddedness, which I will describe in great detail as we move through the model. Third, this idea of experimentation. Another word might be innovation, and how does that become a normal part of the practice? A fourth is the targeting of high doses. This is a little bit unusual language, and what it's getting at is these kind of high frequency things that we do. How do we make those high frequency things better? That's what we're talking about. How do we target those high dosage aspects of our work? And then the last one, the fifth aspect of this, is what we call zeal, meaning great enthusiasm, passion in our work, and how do we lead with, coach with zeal in our practice. So that will be the focus of this work of the BEETZ model. Look forward to discussing it with you all. Thanks.